Hey guys and girls, Bored Now back with you. On this video I will be talking about Season 3, Episode 3 of Netflix's Lost in Space. The episode is called The New Guys, so full spoilers. And once again, I really enjoyed this one. I think this season has really found its groove now. I think this is probably my favourite episode so far. A really big episode for Judy, but really all the plots are used quite well, considering they're sort of jumping about 3 different plots at least. So the new guy of the title is what they start calling the new robot, the Scarecrow, that John, Maureen and Donna are working with. And again, it sort of builds on the whole suspense of, can these robots really be trusted? But Maureen has this sort of grand plan where they're obviously outnumbered on this planet by all these different robots, and they're obviously sneaking around so not to be detected. But what it comes down to is that they need an engine so that they can reach their destination. And Maureen has this plan to use the robot they've got as a way to distract I've got that plan the wrong way around. The plan is I think it's Don. No, sorry. It's Don and John. The plan is that they'll distract all the other robots in a moon buggy type thing, and then Maureen and Scarecrow will then try and snatch the part in time and get it back. And it's one of those things where John expresses concern, first of all, I think because he doesn't trust Scarecrow, he doesn't trust the robot. And there's a scene where he thinks the robot is spying on them, listening to their conversations. So there's that whole thing. So it's one of those where it's almost like a risky plan either way, because John's like, can you really trust this guy? This guy, this robot, should I leave you alone with it? And also saying, well, it's a risky plan anyway, because if you're going to try and make a grab for the engine, what if it doesn't quite work? What if they're there waiting for you? And she sort of confronts him with, well, sure, but the alternative is then I go and face up to all these different robots, and there's a risk on that end as well. So it is one of those, and I think that's one of the things I like about Maureen as a character, is she is very proactive and she's very brave and also very honest. She does lay it out for John. It's not just her being ridiculously heroic for the cause, although that there is a side of that, but it's also then it's one of those things where they have to try and do something, and sometimes it's best to just go for broke and just go for a plan out of left field rather than just doing nothing. So she's like, yes, there's a risk on either end. This may be the lesser of two evils. And the way it sort of transpires is then the robots are actually tricking them. So, because they all get, obviously, or a lot of them anyway, go after the buggy, but then it's revealed then they're actually distracting John and Don, not the other way around, because a bunch of them have then gone after Maureen and the robot, Scarecrow. And again, there's some good comedy relief from Don in this episode, because the episode sort of opens with him telling one of his stories, life story to this robot, which is pretty funny. But no, in the end, the robot Scarecrow pretty much sacrifices himself for Maureen, because he's cornered by all the other robots and attacked, and she's hiding behind a rock, and the Scarecrow doesn't give her up, doesn't reveal her. So that pretty much confirms that it's sort of on their side and wants to help them, because as he's looking at her, he sort of says, well, family find home or something, or find home. So it's sort of confirmed that Scarecrow can be trusted and is on their side. Now, I'll talk about Judy's plot in this, because what I really like about Judy in this episode is then by the end of the episode, there's a big moment with her and Grant, her father, her birth father, and it's the sort of moment that just confirms like the growth of Judy over these 3 seasons, that she's developed into like a fully fledged sort of like captain type, leader type, and it's such a interesting scene, such a like fun sort of scene, and a big like character type scene, because what it sort of boils down to in this episode is that like the meteors are like getting worse, and the gravity's getting worse on the planet, so they sort of figure out they've only got a certain amount of time to leave. And at one point, because Judy has gone off with Smith, because Will has been like doing research down in the caves. He's like examining like the alien footprints and various things, and so because they're a bit worried about him, Judy and Smith go off to like try and find him and get him out of there. So at this point, Grant, when they sort of find out that things are getting worse, Grant has this idea to put it on autopilot, that being the ship, meaning that they sort of don't have to leave straight away. But Penny questions this, because it says, well, it's never been on autopilot before, and that's like risky. And the whole theme of the episode and the whole like resistance from Grant is then he's very anti-technology, and he's very anti like just this idea of like the computer dictating like the ship's sort of destination and coordinates and things like that. And that's something which set up in the scene with Penny, which they then come back to in a big way later. But another thing the episode is doing, I think, is like creating suspense over, can Grant actually be trusted? I think that's actually something which is sort of teased at, that he could be up to no good. Like, because in the scene with Judy and Judy and Smith in the cage, Smith starts like trying to hint at, well, can this guy be trusted? Why was he asleep all that time? Why was he like cryogenically frozen all the time? Because that's another thing Grant mentioned. He says, well, because of a computer, I was, cryogenically frozen too long, whereas I should have been up and ready to go. But it's actually good drama. Then in the next scene, you get Smith actually trying to plant seeds and maybe suggest, and probably in some ways she's like legitimately just bringing up concerns, but it always comes across as just Smith being Smith, like trying to drive a wedge between them. And Judy obviously comes to the rescue of her dad. But what's really impressive is then later on, when you get this big set piece where Judy and Grant have this disagreement, is on the one hand Judy wants to stick with the computer coordinates, but Grant sort of talks them into like a new strategy in saying, well, I can fly the ship and we don't need to follow track. And it's one of those like tangible ideas that you can relate to real life, where it's almost like the sort of comparing it to like a sat nav in a car, where like in theory it's giving you the rough estimates, and it's probably like 9 times out of 10 reliable, but it can also have a mind of its own, and there is some like room for error with it. So there's definitely an argument with sat navs. Then hey, you need a human element sometimes, and so I think that's just what sprung to mind when this scene was like playing out. But it's a really great scene for Judy, because they're going through like this meteoral field, and they're sort of having this debate back and forth where Grant is like refusing to return to like the computer's like destined. So it's similar to a sat nav where the computer is telling him to do one thing and he's saying, no, this can't be right, I don't trust it, and he's trying to just do his own thing, and it's strong stuff from Judy, because she's saying like, stand down, basically, really authoritative sort of thing. And it's great drama and tension, because obviously when he finally gives in and caves, there's obviously then suspense over whether Judy has made the right call. And she has a great line, actually, and it's probably the line which confirms that she's probably going to end up being right. But it's when she says, because Grant says something like, you can't trust a computer, and Judy says, no, but I can trust my mother, because the whole thing is that it's the mother who set the coordinates in the first place, and that's the key. And that's a big moment almost for Judy to like defend her mother in the face of this like criticism and questioning, and it obviously pays off, and they end up being saved with it. But it's just such a great character scene for Judy. It's a great sort of beat where it shows that although she's like happy to be united with her real birth father, and is enjoying his company and things like that, she's also not afraid to do her job and what she thinks is right for the mission. So I just love it. I love the whole drama of it, and I think it's a big Judy episode. It's like the episode that sort of confirms her as like a fully grown sort of captain, and obviously then afterwards Grant has to sort of like bow down and admit that he's wrong, I'm sorry, and he also reveals that the mother was training to be an astronaut, which is something they didn't know. So that's obviously a big reveal to them as well. And there's certain other things. I mean, there's more stuff with Smith being Smith, sort of questioning things. There's actually quite a nice scene with VJ and Penny, because as I said, I think like the love triangle has been a little bit of the weaker side of the season so far, but it once again shows that they still care about each other, that being Penny and VJ. But like Penny's obviously defending Liam, but it's quite a well worked sort of like thing where VJ, because they're sort of talking about something to do with Liam and how people act in those situations, and I think it goes back to the thing up on the mountain where like VJ almost died and Liam kind of came to his rescue, but at one point says, well, my parents do that, and VJ's like, well, yeah, parents do that, and it sort of ends up with him asking about his parents, and did like Penny's parents mention them when they briefly spoke, and she says, well, we didn't speak for that long, but she comforts him and says, I'm sure your parents are all right. So it ends up being quite a tender little scene, and her reassuring him, and the sort of big thing that ends up happening with Smith and Will in the episode is she wants some sort of insurance that they won't just turn her in when they get to to the place they're going, which name I forget now, but she's obviously concerned that they'll just turn her over, and Judy tries to like assure her, no, we won't do that, but she wants like an insurance policy, and this comes back later with Will, where she takes his camera, and because it's important to him and the research and stuff, she sort of treats that as like an insurance policy, where she's like, well, as soon as we get to where we're going, I'll give it back to you. But he actually offers himself as like an insurance policy, and he strikes a deal with her, and part of this is to do with to do with the research which he has discovered in these caves, and it's because when they get to the planet, he intends to like sort of sneak off with the robot and do something which will be revealed in a later episode, I'm sure. But Smith kind of has this like sort of like moment of satisfaction where she's like, well, finally some lesson I've taught you has paid off, and they sort of strike a deal, like a sort of a style of compromise, that she'll help him as long as he agrees to be like her insurance policy. So they do come to like a compromise. So it's interesting stuff. Once again, I like the way they've worked Smith into the drama, and some classic Smith style scenes. And obviously, like, out of the three children, she's kind of has the closest sort of relationship with Will, largely like manipulating him in earlier seasons. So there's something sort of perfect about them now hatching this plan together. So there you have it. Lost in Space, Season 3, Episode 3. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll be back soon with more. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.